Well, talking about having fun, Sony is launching the PlayStation VR today. It claims it's going to bring virtual reality gaming to the masses. Headset's cheaper. It doesn't require a high-powered gaming computer to run it, but just the existing PS4. Guy Cocker is editor-in-chief of Stuff magazine.
The breakthrough in VR in general is difficult to get across if you haven't actually used it yourself. So imagine if you're playing a video game, for example, through a normal flat screen TV, like most people are. It's like viewing through a window into another world. There's that sort of, it's ultimately impossible to be completely immersed in it because there's that plate of glass between you and what you're experiencing. But with virtual reality, when you pop the headset on, it's like being there. The thing that the reason it's taken so long for VR to become a reality is it's got to trick your brain into thinking that you're there for it to work. And so the technology has come on leaps and bounds in the last few years. Only earlier this year, the first headsets came out, the first dedicated headsets from HTC and a company called Oculus, which was purchased by Facebook. But they cost around £650 or £750 in the HTC case just for the headset alone. So when you factored in the cost of a very expensive computer as well, you were looking at essentially £1,500 to £2,000 to experience it. So that was out of the realms of possibility for most people. But even just this year, it's now got to the stage where you can actually use your PlayStation 4, which is a device, it's the most popular games console in the UK. It's a device that a lot of people have in their homes already, where you can now buy that and a virtual reality headset from Sony, which is coming out very shortly, and it's now £350 for that headset. So the prices are coming down, and of course, if you want a very basic experience, you can get Google Cardboard or the Samsung Gear VR, which is even cheaper still.
Sure. But I was going to ask you about that because we're talking about mass market here. That's what Sony does best. And are they really going to hit the mass market if your PS4 costs £300, and then your headset costs another £350? That's still a lot of money.
No, they're not. They're not going to hit the mass market. They're going to still be appealing to your either your hardcore gamers or a certain subsection of people like myself that have to have the latest thing and experience it and kind of show it off to their friends. So yeah, you're still looking at £650 probably, at least for the full setup. What it is it's the company starting to get virtual reality out there so that people can experience it, and you can expect to see a lot of these in video game stores and probably some high street stores as well being demonstrated. But really it's about just getting the technology out there so that content makers, and this is always the big thing for a new piece of hardware, is the content there. And actually, to be totally fair, in my experience with the device, having played it for the last week or so, there's some great demos, there's some great pieces of content. One of the highlights is sort of suiting up as Batman and feeling as though you're Batman. I know it sounds very odd, but it's a really, really cool experience. But ultimately, the game is only about 2 hours long, so it's a very short experience, one of those things that you'll show to your friends. Yeah. But really, this is Sony releasing something that it will then build on. The headsets will get cheaper over the coming years. They'll probably even start to get bundled in with consoles as the technology becomes cheaper for them to make. But they have to release something. It's like all technology. It has to be released at a high price to reach the volume of manufacturing that makes it cheaper and that allows developers to make games for the headset. Yeah.
My thought about VR was it was a sort of a rich man's plaything, because if you looked at the sets that came, the big heavy computers, as you said, and then the Oculus Rift headset, you almost wanted a rubber room, didn't you? You wanted a place where you had nothing else but your computer and a heavy-duty cable connecting that to the headset so that you could kind of roam around, in a sense, even though you were really completely blind. Am I missing the point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you would have a separate room. You would have your virtual reality room that you'd set up just for this, so that you had plenty of space, as you say, to walk around. That's the experience that you want when you're playing in VR. You want to be able to walk around, use motion-based controllers as you can on the PlayStation and HTC Vive, and experience it as if you were in these worlds that game makers have created. I think for people that haven't experienced VR, it's very difficult to get across just how impressive and how immersive that first experience is. It's, for me, it's, I've covered technology for 10 years. It's genuinely one of the most exciting things I've ever experienced in technology. It's up there with, experiencing a touchscreen phone for the first time. It's genuinely revolutionary, but it is also very restrictive as well. There's something counterintuitive to it at the moment. In a world where we live now, where when people are watching TV and watching movies, they're tweeting along with them. They're always distracted by their mobile phone. Actually, VR is like I say, a complete counterpoint to that, because it's blocking out the real world. I think it's interesting that Facebook have bought Oculus, because the owner of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, has gone on record as saying actually he doesn't think that the future of VR is video games. It's actually allowing you to relive memories from the past. So he talked about his young daughter, being able to be able to film that using a 360-degree camera and then experiencing that again in 10, 20 years' time. Jeez. And actually, I think for it to go truly mainstream, it needs to have things like whatever you're into, if it's football or, going to see the Rolling Stones live, that experience of being able to be in the front row and actually feel like you're there if you couldn't buy a ticket. I think that's actually the thing that's going to drive VR.
Yeah. Except if you do go to see the Rolling Stones, everybody else has got 360-degree cameras and they're behaving like nerds.
Blocking your view, yeah.
Yeah, blocking the view. How do you actually persuade somebody to put one of these headsets on? Because isn't it like stepping into an isolation tank? I mean, isn't it scary to put on a VR headset?
Yeah, so we on the stuff. I'm on a magazine called Stuff, and on the team, everyone was really excited to try this headset on. But we actually set it up for people in our business that weren't used to video games or virtual reality, and a lot of people were actually quite trepidatious about putting on a headset and experience it, because it is such an overwhelming experience, and you can play games and you can interact with things, but there are a lot of demos where you just experience being in another world, so you can experience what it's like being on the moon or being under the sea. And when this huge killer whale comes by you and looks directly at you, it can be quite an overwhelming experience. What it's down to Sony to do really is to get this thing into people's hands or on their heads so that they can experience it, and that needs demo pods in stores really. But like you say, there's a certain subsection of the community that just are not interested in being overwhelmed. They quite like the flat TV experience because they have access to the real world. They know it's an illusion, but there's something that is
an illusion. Yes. Yeah. If you put this on, just to extend that a little bit, I mean, if you put this on somebody who's got a weak heart, you're taking a bit of a risk, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's some demos that I've played. Obviously the video game market has a lot of what you would call horror games or quite scary games. And when you are in this world and you go through the experience of something as common as being killed in a video game, that's a very common thing for video game players to have experienced. If you're shot or stabbed or anything like that in virtual reality, it's a very daunting experience. I was at the big video game show in Los Angeles last year, and all of the other journalists were kind of egging themselves on to try this video game that had been released by the makers of Resident Evil, where this young girl, kind of in a Japanese horror sense, comes and stabs you, and it's very, very intense. So I would warn anyone with a kind of weak disposition to avoid playing VR.
Scary, eh? Going back to the fear of things for a minute, which we were talking about before, the Americans' fears. Clowns are right down near the bottom of the list, 7%. I bet you £1 a penny that was before the current scary clown meme took off as it has. Anyway, that was Guy Cocker, by the way, from Stuff magazine. And to me, I've seen people wearing VR headsets sitting on stools, and my big thought is they're going to fall off that stool. They're going to jump, they're going to yell, they're going to reach out for something. They're going to forget they're sitting on a stool. The sun rises this morning in Manchester at 7:33.